Welcome to Amir Shakti 5858 War and Love Reports. I am Amir Goodman. Following is the compilation of major headline news which were broadcasted by the major American news networks. Those included PBS, Democracy Now!, NBC, ABC, CBS. I didn't include the headlines of CNN and Fox News because I couldn't find them. I also didn't include the European English broadcasting channel because they don't have a American kind of news structure or presentation pattern. Southern major headlines from democracynow.org. Soldiers in Gabon declared their seizing power and nullifying recent election as they took to national television earlier today. Soldier commanders said on television the general elections of August 26, 2023, as well as the truncated results, are cancelled. The borders are closed until further notice. All institutions of the republic are dissolved. During the day, Gabon's National Election Authority announced President Albango Ondimiba has been re-elected for a third term in Saturday's elections, which was marred by delays and decried by opposition leader Albert Ando as a fraud. Bango, who's reportedly being held under house arrest, has already served 2 7-year terms. His family has been in power for over half a century. Critics accuse Bango of not using the West African nation's oil and natural resource wealth to improve the lives of one-third of the population living in poverty. The French oil giant Total Energies is Gabon's main distributor of petroleum products. Gabon freed itself from French rule in 1960 as soldiers drove through the capital. Libreville residents took to the streets to cheer them on. If successful, it would be the 8th coup in West Africa and Central Africa since 2020. Now the hurricane Idalia made landfall along the Big Bend area of Florida's Gulf Coast as a Category 3 storm with winds of 125 miles per hour. Is likely to be the most powerful hurricane to affect Florida's capital, Tallahassee, in decades. More than 100,000 customers have lost power when Idalia hit Florida coast. 30 of the state's 67 counties were issued at least partial evacuation orders as of early this morning, as officials warned residents of catastrophic storm surges of up to 12 to 16 feet. Authorities said yesterday very few people can survive being in the path of major storm surge, and this storm will be deadly if we don't get out of harm's way and take it seriously. The Biden administration released a list of the first 10 prescription drugs. Medicare will now be able to negotiate prices on, which could lead to a savings of some $100 billion over the next decade. The price negotiation was established as part of 2022's Inflation Reduction Act, and it is a massive blow for Big Pharma, which has been fighting the plan in courts in at least 8 lawsuits. The drugs are used to treat diabetes, cancer, and heart disease, among other conditions. The White House said senior citizens paid $3.4 billion and out-of-pocket costs for the 10 medications in the past year. This is President Biden.
For years, Big Pharma blocked us. They kept prescription drug prices high, to increase their profits, to extend patents on existing drugs to suppress fair competition instead of innovating. Playing games with pricing so they can charge whatever they can. But this is finally, we had enough votes by a matter of one to beat Big Pharma.
The negotiated prices will not take effect until 2026. Some drugs will exempted from further negotiations, including those which were approved by the FDA less than 9 years ago. In Uganda, two men are facing what are believed to be the first charges of aggravated homosexuality after a new draconian anti-LGBTQ law was passed earlier this year, which also punishes consensual same-sex relations. The charges could lead to life in prison and even the death penalty. The law has been widely condemned by rights groups, the UN, and other countries. Earlier this month, the World Bank and said it's suspending new loans to Uganda over the law. Meanwhile, in Nigeria, over 2 dozen people were arrested at a gay wedding in the south of the country Monday. Same-sex marriage is illegal in Nigeria, punishable by up to 14 years behind bars. More than 30 African nations banned same-sex relationships. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, army officials are reporting at least 14 people are dead after militia fighters attacked a village in the northeastern part of the country. Military officials have blamed the Codeco militia for the attack. More than 120 armed groups have been in bloody conflict in the region, many over control of land and mines, while others are fighting to protect their communities. The Danish government proposed a new bill that would ban the burning of the Quran under penalty of fines or up to 2 years in prison. This comes after recent public desecration of the Quran by far-right protesters in Denmark and Sweden, setting off international condemnation and demonstrations across the Muslim world. This is Denmark's Justice Minister.
When individuals demonstratively go out and burn the Quran daily, as we have seen recently, it's a basic mockery, unsympathetic action. It harms Denmark and Danish interests, and it risks the security of Danes out in the world and at home.
In Bahrain, at least 800 prisoners have been on hunger strike for over 3 weeks, protesting human rights violations and worsening conditions. Prisoners have denounced arbitrary solitary confinement, cell lockdowns of 23 hours a day, and no access to medical care and education. This is the biggest hunger strike led by political prisoners in the Gulf nation's history, with hundreds of the others also taking to the streets in solidarity with the strikes of the Zoho prison, the largest in Bahrain. Officials have reportedly agreed to increase the duration of visitations and said they are looking into raising the time prisoners are allowed outdoors. Many of them are arrested, tortured, and imprisoned following the 2011 massive uprising during the Arab Spring. In Pakistan, an appeal court Tuesday suspended former Prime Minister Imran Khan's 3-year prison sentence and conviction on corruption charges. If the court decides to set aside his conviction, he will be allowed to run for office. An election scheduled for November. But despite being granted bail, Khan will remain in detention at least for now, over another criminal case involving in the leak of classified information. Dozens of charges brought against Khan since he was removed from office in a no confidence vote in April last year. Khan denounced the charges as politically motivated. Amidst mounting US-China tensions, lawmakers in 33 states have introduced legislation this year to prohibit Chinese entities and even buying Chinese citizens from buying agricultural land or property near military bases. Dozens of those bills have passed into law, including Florida's controversial SB 264, which has been challenged by a group of Chinese citizens who cited violations of the Fair Housing Act. The Washington Post reports while most of the legislation making its way through state houses also names countries like Iran and North Korea. China is the clear target. Rights groups and some political leaders say such restriction will further stoke anti-Asian sentiment. I quote, there is ignorance out there that causes people to think that because you are Chinese, you are part of the Chinese government, said former Texas State Representative Martha Wong to the Washington Post. A new report finds air pollution reduces global life expectancy by 2.3 years, slightly more than being a smoker. The study by the Energy Policy Institute at University of Chicago concludes fine particles, air pollution from vehicles, industrial emissions, wildfires, and other sources are, quote, the greatest external public health threat to public health, unquote. In South Asia, air pollution cuts life expectancy by an average of 5 years, with the air quality in New Delhi, India, leading to a loss of life of more than 10 years on average. In Greece, firefighters are battling a massive wildfire in the northeast Everest region for the 12th straight day. The blazes destroyed an area greater than New York City and what has become the largest ever recorded wildfire in European Union. Greek officials said the fire was still out of control around the Dodger National Park. This is the head of conservation at WWF, Greece.
Because of its very high biodiversity, the National Park of Dadia was one of the most important protected areas in Greece and also in Europe, perhaps also on an international scale. And at the moment, at least 30% of the park has been lost to fire.
In the United States, wildfire in southwestern Louisiana killed 2 people and scorched roughly 60,000 acres as of Tuesday. Governor John Bell Edwards said the fires are the worst Louisiana has experienced since at least the Second World War, amidst a record-breaking drought. Meanwhile, in Maui, the search for wildfire victims on land has ended, with search efforts now moving to the ocean. The official death toll has reached 115 people, with many still missing. The Environmental Protection Agency has rolled back parts of the Clean Water Act, which protects millions of acres of wetlands, in order to comply with the Supreme Court ruling. The right-wing dominated COPS ruled in May that wetlands must have a continuous surface connection to stream, oceans, rivers, and lakes to be subject to federal regulations on pollution. Up 63% of wetland will be affected, The White House said the Supreme Court ruling could jeopardize the sources of clean drinking water for farmers, businesses, and millions of Americans. And the Committee on the Rights of the Child said Monday government must address the climate crisis and other environmental emergencies to, quote, ensure that. Following are the major news of PBS NewsHour. Hurricane Idalia sweeps across Florida, bringing devastating storm surge winds and rain. Gabon's military ousts its president immediately after his re-election, the latest in a recent spate of coups in West and Central African nations. And Judy Woodruff explores the link between the decline of local news and the rise in partnership. Mary Margaret White, CEO, Mississippi Today, said,
People are really beginning to understand the value of journalism to our democracy, the value of it to local communities.
Hurricane Idalia has weakened to a tropical storm tonight, hours after it blasted north Florida with winds near 125 miles an hour and a wall of water that caused heavy flooding. Officials reported 2 rain-related traffic deaths. Thousands of people choose to get out of harm's way while others hunkered down for the first major storm to hit the state this year. After a night of raging wind and rain, Hurricane Idalia landed early today on Florida's Gulf Coast. Those who sheltered in place woke up to find flooded streets. A resident says the flooding is unbelievable. He said he is not going to be able to go to work and he don't think for a couple of days. And this is going to be devastating, I think, for at least a couple of days. The hurricane could be seen from the International Space Station. The storm hit hardest in the Big Bend region where the Florida Panhandle curves into the peninsula. After the hurricane had passed, officials urged people to remain watchful for surging waters and rising tides. Local utility companies staged crews and trucks in anticipation of outages. As of midday, when the eye of the hurricane moved out of Florida, hundreds of thousands of people were without power. Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican Florida.
The state is still being impacted by the storm's bands, and we're seeing that particularly in the northern part of the state. Utility workers are actively working to restore power in all affected areas.
As Idalia moved inland, the storm was on track to cross Georgia and head into the Carolinas before moving back into the Atlantic Ocean. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp said he expected the storm to move quickly through the state, but he cautioned people not to let their guards down. Governor Kemp.
It's a dangerous storm. People need to prepare. They need to be ready when it's coming through and either, move a county or two up if they have the ability to do that. If not, make sure they're in a secure location.
Up to 120,000 people in Georgia had already lost power by the afternoon. Back in Florida, images from the storm's aftermath included this one of a downed tree at the governor's mansion in Tallahassee. President Biden today spoke about the storm's impact.
Federal teams on the ground are going to continue to work with the first responders in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina to get people to safety. I let each governor I spoke with know if there's anything the states need right now, I'm ready to mobilize that support when they need.
All of this in a state still recovering from last year's Hurricane Ian that destroyed the thousands of buildings and killed nearly 150 people. Now the other news headlines. The White House announced a grant of $95 million to strengthen the electrical grid on the island of Maui in Hawaii. It will come from last year's infrastructure law. There have been questions about whether downed power lines sparked the Maui wildfire that consumed Lahaina. The fire killed 115 people, while more than 300 is still missing. A federal judge in Washington ruled today that Rudy Giuliani defamed two Georgia election workers by accusing them of ballot fraud in the 2020 vote. The default judgment came after the Trump lawyer and advisor failed to turn over required documents. The judge also ordered Giuliani to pay more than $130,000 in legal fees for his accusers. The two sides in the Russian-Ukraine war traded heavy aerial assaults overnight. The Ukrainians launched what appeared to be their biggest drone barrage yet, hitting airports and military planes inside Russian territory. Russian video caught the explosion from afar. The attacks reportedly hit 6 regions and lasted more than 4 hours. Moscow accused Kyiv Western allies of helping. Maria Zakharov, spokeswoman Russian Foreign Ministry, through translator.
Ukrainian drone attacks on civilian objects confirm the terrorist essence of the Kiev regime once again. It's clear that Ukrainian drones weren't able to fly those distances without assistance from Western satellite information.
In the meantime, Russian drones and missiles lit up the sky over Kyiv in the biggest bombardment of Ukraine's capital in months. By daybreak, smoke was still rising and officials reported 2 deaths. US officials said new intelligence shows Russian leader Vladimir Putin is actively trying to buy weapons from North Korea for the war in Ukraine. The White House disclosed today that Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have now exchanged letters about an arms deal. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby spoke about that in an off-camera briefing.
He's going to North Korea to try to get artillery shells and the basic materials so that he can continue to shore up his defense industrial base. There is no other way to look at that than desperation and weakness.
Also today, North Korea fired 2 more short-range ballistic missiles into the sea. That came hours after a US strategic bomber flew over the Korean peninsula during military drills. The Kremlin conceded today that a plane crash that killed Russian mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin could have been foul play. US officials have suggested it was retaliation for his short-lived mutiny 2 months ago. Prigozhin was buried yesterday in his hometown of St. Petersburg. The site quickly brought out mourners paying their respects. In US, former Catholic Cardinal Theodore McCarrick will not be tried on charges that he sexually assaulted a teenage boy in 1974. A psychologist testified today at a Massachusetts hearing that McCarrick has a dementia. Both sides agreed and the judge dismissed the case. McCarrick is 93 years old. He was defrocked in 2019 after a Vatican investigation found he molested adults and children for decades. The Labor Department proposed today that another 3.6 million salaried workers will be eligible for overtime. It affects those making less than $55,000 a year. That's up nearly $20,000 from the current threshold. The Obama administration tried something similar, but business groups defeated it in court. And on Wall Street, stocks managed fractional gains. The Dow Jones Industrial up Following are the today's headline news of NBC News, which are presented by John Lester, anchorperson, and his NBC other reporters. Tonight, Idalia on the move after making landfall in Florida as a major Category 3 hurricane. Idalia roaring ashore with 125-mile-an-hour winds and torrential rain. The force toppling the roof of a gas station. It's now the strongest hurricane to hit Florida's Big Bend in 127 years. NBC reporters were on ground as it made landfall. Catastrophic storm surge. up to 9 feet, widespread flooding homes and roads underwater. The storm blamed for at least 2 deaths and forcing dozens of water rescues. Hundreds of thousands without power tonight. One family at home with their baby when tree came crashing in. How they survived. NBC asked Florida Governor Ron DeSantis what does he say to those who now stranded. Tonight, Idalia, now a tropical storm, moving up the southeast, spawning a possible tornado, flipping a car in South Carolina. NBC team across the storm zone, and weatherman Al Roker with a new track. Another alarming moment for Mitch McConnell, the Senate GOP student heads back to class. Allegation of a hostile takeover in a major Texas school district. There are big changes this year in some Houston, Texas school districts. A district eliminating dozens of schools, librarians, the controversial reason why and how some families are fighting back. Here's NBC reporter Antonia Hilton.
Cherries and blueberries.
Houston mom Jessica Campos has spent the entire summer dreading the return to school.
I feel like I've spent my entire summer fighting. So coming here, it kind of, I can breathe.
Ever since her daughter's elementary became one of more than 28 schools in the Houston Independent School District, replacing their library with a center for work and discipline.
What's happening to the Houston schools? It feels like they're being taken apart, dismantled, destroyed.
This summer, the state of Texas took over HISD, a district of almost 200,000 kids, a blue city in a red state. They replaced the elected school board members and swapped the superintendent for a charter school owner and former leader of Dallas schools. Some, like Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner, say it's a hostile takeover.
Houston has been in conflict with his own state government for years. Okay, so let's not be fooled.
Everyone agrees Houston schools needed to change. Some were failing. Many students fell behind in reading and math. District leaders tried to improve, and the state even gave them a B rating in 2022. They took over anyway and laid off employees and replaced libraries in underperforming schools so they could give some teachers higher salaries.
I can't afford a laptop for my kid. So books is where we get to travel, to dream. I can't do it.
Jessica's daughter Sophie is starting 5th grade at one of the new education system schools.
I barely know how to read. I just started reading this grade because my English teacher helped me a lot.
Stripes. She says the library was a place where she could practice.
I say and
Superintendent Mike Miles understands families are anxious about change, but he argues books will still be available on shelves, and these team centers where students will work or go when they are disruptive will help kids like Sophie catch up.
In a district where there are so many kids who are struggling to read, why disrupt the library of all places?
So, reading is key. We may not have librarians, but even in this room, books are on the shelves.
Do you believe librarians are important?
Every single position has value. We can't be all things to all people, and we can't have everything we want.
So does that mean you're robbing Peter to pay Paul?
No, I wouldn't phrase it that way. What I would say is we're putting in a bold, different model that works.
Jessica Campos considered busing Sophie to another school, away from her neighborhood and friends.
I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to leave those kids there.
She says parents aren't going to let their school change without a fight. Antonia Hilton, NBC News, Houston, Texas.
NBC are honoring the legacy of NBC News legend Don Brown has passed away. He was an institution here, a newsman to his core. He was a respected journalist and dear friend to so many during his decades leading NBC News, NBC Miami station WTV, J and later Telemundo. He was honored with a place in the Broadcasting and Cable Hall Following are the major news of CBS News. Hurricane Adiala lashing Georgia and the Carolinas after making landfall. As a major Category 3 storm in Florida, knocking out power lines to hundreds of thousands. The urgent water rescue is underway as the FEMA administrator warns the danger is not over here. The record-breaking storm destroying gas stations, homes and boats were on the ground as rescues are underway in flooded neighborhoods. The water is coming from the river and is draining into the canal, and that is where they are seeing homes flooded. Plus, where Adalia is headed next. Mitch McConnell frees again. His health is scared. The person asked, "Did you hear the question, Senator?" The Senate's top Republican freezes during a press conference. The second time in as many months. "All right, I'm sorry," his assistant said. "You are all we are gonna need a minute." Unquote. Growing criticism after CBS News questioning reveals Miles Mayer didn't place a single call for emergency backup during the deadly fires. CBS reporter Jonathan asked if the buck stops with your office. How is that possible? The mayor replied that he can't speak to what or whose responsibility it.
We heard the bomb. Civil silence. So yes, you can speak.
Midair scare. The new details after 11 people are rushed to the hospital.
Midair scare. The new details after 11 people are rushed to the hospital after a Delta flight hits severe turbulence. A parent said she hopefully would find everything she needs here. Parents across the country are back to school shopping. How is inflation impacted? The bottom line is not just the school supplies itself. It was everything else that's gone up. Tonight, the moon is expected to be the biggest and brightest. It will be the rest of. Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.